There. So I'm very happy to welcome you to the 50th anniversary celebration of Voices Israel. And we owe a big thanks to all who've enabled us to hold it, especially, sorry, could people please mute themselves so that we don't hear all the background noises? Thank you. Especially Wendy Bloomfield, who's worked incredibly hard to prepare our anniversary chapbook and indeed to prepare this meeting, and all the old timers who've contributed their memories, and all the poets who've continued the vision of poetry in English as seen in our history from the very beginning up until now, the 21st century. So first of all, a big thank you to everybody. And I'd like to go on to start by recapping briefly the history of Voices Israel. According to a detailed record we have, which was left by one of the founders, Moshe Ben Tzvi, Voices Israel started as the result of a personal ad placed in the Jerusalem Post by Leslie Summers in July of 1971. Okay. Moshe and Reuben Rose responded to that ad, and that August, those three and Yaakov Katwan, who was originally the fourth founder, met at Yaakov's house in Haifa. Okay. Voices was founded as a result of that meeting. Reuven soon emerged as the natural leader of the four and took responsibility for all the organizing and advertising. Already at their first meeting, these founders raised the possibility of a future poetry magazine, but they saw it as a dream. But meanwhile, Voices got underway, and by the following year, 1972, Reuven had started meetings in Tel Aviv as well as Haifa. Mark L. Levinson joined in 1975 and later took over coordination of the Tel Aviv group. Reuven also started the Jerusalem group, and for many years, Voices had these three strong groups in the main cities, and also gradually was adding members around the world. By 1972, there was already a two-page newsletter written by Reuven, and for several decades it was printed on both sides of a page of foolscap paper. The newsletter itself on one side and the poems edited by Ezra Ben Meir on the other. We don't quite know when the practice began of including the poems, but it was certainly before 1990, because the first Decade of Poetry volume, which came out in 2000 and covered the period from 1990 to 2000, states that those poems were selected from the, quote, one page containing 6 to 7 poems in the newsletter. Okay. But the cost and effort of printing the newsletter became very burdensome. And when Wendy Bloomfield became president in 2011, she, together with the secretary, who was first Helen Bar-Lev and then Avril Melem, moved the newsletter into the digital age, okay, and distributed it by email. A gradually decreasing number of members who had not yet adopted computers continued to receive printed copies. These changes revolutionized the newsletter because there was now no limit to its length, which led to the multi-page version we have today, creatively edited and with a recent new look by our current secretary, Linda Suchi. Oh, and that Unreal Dream, the poetry magazine, it turned into an annual anthology called Voices, which published its first volume already in December 1972, which I think is pretty good going, considering that they only started in the summer of 1971. It had 13 contributors, and the initial submission rules, you will be lucky you don't have to follow them, you will think yourself lucky, specified 6 poems in quadruplicate. We are still in the age of carbon copies, people, of which 3 might be chosen. By 1976, it was called Voices, a workshop for English poetry in Israel. It included contributions from 37 people, and it sold, including through bookstores, for the princely sum of 7 shekels. It's appeared annually ever since, and today, as we know, it publishes a maximum of 2 poems each. Okay. from 3 maximum that you can send in, and around 70 to nearly 100 poets from Israel and abroad do send their poems into it. In 2018, we moved that too to the digital age via Submittable, which makes it much easier also to produce the anthology, which has been ably edited for several years by Dina Yehuda. So, Ruben Rose passed the editorship of the anthology to Mark L. Levinson in 1988 and died in 1989. The competition named after him was established that same year and has run annually ever since, so that we're just about to open the 32nd competition. Take note, everybody, in another 4 days. After Ruben died, Mike Scheidemann took over as president, and it was he who started the practice of holding first one day and then weekend workshops, probably sometime during the 1990s, although the earliest chapbook we have from a workshop is from 2007. All the printed chapbooks of workshops were produced by John Michael Simon, who also designed and produced until this year all the anthologies, and we owe them all a huge measure of thanks. And so we come to modern times. In 2011, when Wendy Bloomfield became president, Voices still had 3 groups in the 3 main cities. Wendy greatly expanded the society by recruiting members from peripheral areas to start groups there. An Upper Galilee group, which was run by Tommy Berman until his tragic death, and thereafter by Reuven Goldfarb in Tzfat, and a Western Galilee group run by Filthy Gross. Though the Haifa group, which was then run by Susan Rosenberg, lost these members, it continued to grow steadily. Then Susan Olsberg started the Netanya group, and meanwhile small groups were started also in Modi'in, Beit Shemesh, in Efrat, Beersheva, and Rehovot. Now, of course, some of these smaller groups have had their ups and downs. Okay? On the other hand, Chaim Betzalel did manage to establish another small group in Ashkelon. Wendy also tried to establish groups abroad in London and Berlin, but they faded out. And I myself have tried to get a North American group going, but have not so far managed to find a coordinator. Anybody from America who is at the moment here and listening and feels that they could manage to be coordinator, please contact me. The Zoom era, however, has shown us a possible way out of this dilemma. A few months ago, I started a global group, a permanent Zoom group for members anywhere who can't travel or who have no local group. It's now one of our biggest groups, with members from the UK, the USA, and Canada, as well as Israel. And in addition, peripheral groups, which were struggling to exist for lack of members, have been able to join up with other groups. So this enabling of previously isolated members to take an active part in our meetings has been so beneficial to all of us that I think Zoom will continue to be a presence in our lives. And some events, such as an occasional workshop, not all of them, but one every now and then, or the competition prize givings, which usually have overseas winners as well as Israeli, might continue to be held via Zoom. So we have a lot to think about going forward. One thing is certain, that Voices Israel will continue to be the strong, vibrant association of people who are passionate about poetry. And that concludes my brief history, and I now want to turn you over to Wendy for the tributes to our founders. Wendy, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Well done, Judy.
Yes, I wanted to say that Judy has taken on so many jobs since she became president. She's much more computer literate than all of us. So when she says, I prepared this anniversary booklet, I can confess that she did most of the dotting the I's and crossing the T's and proofreading and adjusting fonts and things and everything else.
I dotted some I's and crossed some T's, but Wendy did all the main work of collecting all the material and organizing it and arranging it and rewriting it. So I am definitely the second here.
Thank you to both of you.
Well, anyway, I just had a coughing fit, so I hope my voice is going to last out all right. We have to remember our founders, because when Voices started, there was really a dearth of English-speaking groups in Israel that were open to everybody. There were university groups and some other closed groups, but not an open group like this. So today we welcome poets who have been members of Voices Israel since the early years, but we also remember those who are no longer with us. At the same time as we celebrate 50 years of Voices, we know that this is the centenary year of the birth of Reuben Rose. He made it his life's mission to expand the organization, as already described. His poetry reflected his faith and his dry humor. His late wife, Susie, was always by his side, hosting committee meetings, and she continued to support Voices Israel after his death. The Reuben Rose International Competition is organized annually in his memory. The longest serving president of Voices was Mike Scheidemann, Zechron Bracha, of Kibbutz Yisrael. For 15 years, he worked diligently to develop the organization, find judges for the Reuben Rose competition, and as Judy said, organize the award ceremony and initiate the residential workshops and day workshops, which brought members from all over the country to meet together. Initially, John Diggs, who happily is still with us, was treasurer, a job that nobody usually wants in a non-profit organization, and was greatly valued for handling the hyperinflation in the 1970s. When he stepped down, Mel Millman, Zichron Bracha, took over the task. Although Voices exist purely through membership and subscriptions and competition fees, Mel always kept a healthy budget. After his death, his wife Hanita generously offered to continue managing the accounts and does so to this day efficiently and graciously. Other founding members whose memories are fresh in our minds are Tommy Berman, Roy Runs, Gretty Isaac, David Bloomfield, and Zev Davis. Others whose loss we regret include Father Elias, Roger White, Charles Cormus, Edith Helen Pappert, Irene Gentry, David Saroff, Jean Cadmon, Eva Aviona, Eva Pincus Emanuel, and Etty Amon Goldwater. We have also lost some of our more recent members whose poems are published in our anthologies. They are sorely missed by us all. However, as Judy said, Voices lives on. And I was very happy to be able to find a lot of our veteran members who were in the early days of Voices, who are still writing wonderful poetry and are with us today. But first, we're just going to read poems by Reuben Rose and by Mike Scheidemann and by Mel Millman. So I will start off with Reuben Rose's poem.
Just a second, Wendy. I want to share the screen for the poems, okay? So if you can wait a second while I share the screens. And hold on a second. Okay, can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, fine. So hold on, I have to scroll down, I see. I thought I had left it at the right place, but
that's too long. No, that's too long.
Yeah, we have to go back to Reuben.
To Reuben Rose.
You know, this is Reuben's. Okay, are you going to say the few words that we thought we would say about Reuben Rose, and about each of the founders at the beginning?
Yes, okay.
Would you like me to show it on the screen, or?
No, it's only a couple of paragraph or two. Reuben wrote several love poems for his dear wife, Susie, who was always by his side. She continued his legacy after his untimely death and supported Voices for the rest of her life. Just before her sudden passing in 2012, she, with editor Mark L. Levinson and illustrators Helen Bar-Lev, Ruth Birnbaum, and layout designer John Michael Simon, put together a wonderful collection, Culled from My Roses. Within its poems, essays, letters, we see the diverse interests and talents of this remarkable but modest man. So this is his poem. He wrote a lot of poems to his wife. And the amusing thing is, I got my own husband involved in Voices after he retired by complaining to him that Reuven always writes love poems to his wife. Why doesn't he write love poems to me? And he wrote some very peculiar and bizarre Valentine poems for me. Okay, my love, a sonnet. Did you one moment think, my dearest dear, that I should not set down sweet thoughts to you? My love, the one who keeps me in good cheer, who thinks not of herself, whose wants are few, whose face graces the pillow next to mine, who looks first to my every wish and whim, whom I have never known to peak or pine, who is my envy for her keeping slim. My darling, you and I came late to love, and for that reason love we all the more. Our loves commingled, adorned from above, agreed to be together till fourscore. Thus happily and lovingly we live, whatever we have to each other give.
That's lovely.
Okay. And
Wonderful.
pardon? Okay. And now I'm going to ask Mark Levinson to read a poem of Mike Scheidemann with the text.
Yes, Mike Scheidemann of blessed memory was Voices president for 15 years after the passing of Reuben Rose of blessed memory. Mike lived in Kibbutz Yisrael and traveled distances to Voices events and committee meetings. During his presidency, he found many prestigious judges for the Reuben Rose competition. He also developed the idea of residential and day workshops where poets from all over the country could reunite and work together. And this is his poem, with apologies for my accent. Mike was he was a Wenwi, he was from Rhodesia. Renewal. My earliest sunny memories, conjured from vague shades, comprise a lone boy staring at morning glory, jades on honeysuckle, crumbling wall. Billowing lilies shine on cast-off cones, needle shafts, chaff of towering pine. Beyond the hedge, dusky spaces spread from a dark edge. Africa of man and nature nowhere drives a sharper wedge. Bushman images are engraved on flanks of passing elephant. Your unwritten laws forewarned a future doomed, so I fled. I sought renewal where anemones bled in Jerusalem's decay to remold my world from Jezreel's dark clay. Sweat clean again in acrid air of an ascetic Hamsin, together with a new class to usher its history in. Multifacets of our globe create a magic scenario like salvos of aloes firing the dun savanna. Our pasts imbue our earthly roots with wistful color, cover our present anchorage in wispy pink wisteria. I entered Israel to bear the brunt of my remoter traits, to shore up my battered image under haven of these skies. I breathed the soft effulgent blue, basked in ethereal flue of cloud-stained hills, cotton-quilted fields. I found you.
Very
Lovely,
good.
thank you.
Beautiful. He wrote
Wonderful.
lovely poetry. Thank you, Mark. Okay, I'm now going to ask Emil Schatz to read a poem of Melem.
Yes. Melem Zal, he joined Voices in the late 80s. And Juanita reports that he had met Hadassah Haskale at a teacher's seminar, and she invited him to a meeting. The rest is history. Then in 1995, Mike Scheidman asked him to take over the Treasury post from John Dix, a position which he held until his death in 2010. I may say that I suspect that during that period, Juanita had more than a little to do with the running of the Treasury side of things, which she has continued with brilliance ever since. Mel's poetry reflected a personality which was brimming with vitality and enthusiasm and a keen sense of observation. Perhaps because, like many of us, he came on Aliyah and lived in Jerusalem. He often noticed the small but illuminating particulars of Israeli life that Sabras perhaps take too much for granted. Such observations informed his work with a freshness and a point that have not faded with the years. The following, which was penned more than 2 decades ago, but is still very relevant, is an excellent example, and it's called Jerusalem Is. Jerusalem is where you find God around every corner and history on the soles of your shoes, where you feel a bit holier for picking up a black-clad, bearded scholar, and a lot angrier watching him riot on TV. Jerusalem is roaming about under the sunlight of a 2,000-year-old dream and barely surviving a bureaucratic nightmare, where world-renowned personalities shop in your supermarket and no one in the place seems to care. Jerusalem is watching yourself crossing the street while the whole world is watching you, where the ghosts of King David's warriors creak in your walls at night and you wake up to the smell of fried eggs. Jerusalem is a beautiful, quiet lady who goes to sleep early and wears 3 different nightgowns in bed, where the enemy sits next to you on the egged bus and you give his aged mother your seat.
Thank you, Emil. Now I'm very happy to go on to all our veteran poets who are with us and writing poetry and participating in our meetings and our workshops. And we hope they will continue to do so for many years. You must realize that when we all joined Voices, we were all very young. So when we say that we've been in Voices for 40 years or 45 years or more, and now we might be older, but we were all very young when we joined. And we really need to bring in some new blood, young blood, in order to carry on some of the jobs that some of us are getting a little tired of doing. So if you know of any young people, apart from Itamar, who's sitting here, we'd like to hear from you. And we hoped from our Young Poets competition that we might get some young blood coming in. I'm still hoping. Okay, so now I'm going on to the poets who are here today with us and have sent me in. And as I say, I thank you very much for acting so promptly and sending in your memories and your poems. And they're going into the anniversary book, and we want to hear from you today. And you've all done a wonderful job of sending in the stuff. Thank you. So the first is Susan Rosenberg, who for many years was Secretary of Voices, Haifa coordinator, membership coordinator. She has a long, long track record with voices. Okay, Susan?
Okay, Wendy. I love being here and I love seeing all of you again. And those of you I had never saw before, I love seeing you too. I first attended a Voices Poets meeting in Haifa in 1978. I had heard about Israel's poetry group in English and saw it as a chance to come out of the closet with my poetry. Until then, until Voices, it was a secret vice that and I would write poems and hide them and not show and not tell. Too personal, and I got over that. I like being personal. The first meeting I came to was held at the AACI office, which was in those days situated under the Supersol in the Merkaz in Haifa. And Reuben Rose ran the meeting. And when it began, one of the women present so harshly criticized another's poem that I thought, uh-oh, no, I'm not going to read my poem here. I didn't attend another meeting until 1980. By then, the Haifa group met at the Moadon Europa, and President Mike Scheidman commuted from his kibbutz to run the meetings. A few years later, the Haifa group met at one another's homes, and that has been our venue ever since. Reuben Rose published a monthly newsletter from 1978 to 1994. Leslie Cohen was secretary, who published the monthly newsletter from 1995 to 2000. And I produced the monthly newsletter from 2001 to 2011 as Ezra Ben Meir, poetry editor. Did a beautiful job of arranging the printed page of poems. I wanted to say something that Wendy had said, but I forget what it was. Oh yes, about sending the newsletter out by Wendy being the one who suggested at a board meeting, at an annual meeting, that sending the printed newsletter out by mail, which I used to do, was too costly, and that it should be done by computer. And I did not feel adequately knowledgeable about computers to be able to do that. So the newsletter became computerized and sent that way, and has been wonderfully continued. 2 years later, wait a moment. I think I'm finished.
You were going to read a poem, surely.
It was also my annual job as secretary to remind members to pay their annual dues. And I only just paid my annual dues. So I feel happy enough to be here.
And you have a poem to read, right?
Yes, I do have a poem. It was published in Voices Israel, Volume 6, in August 1978. I think it was the first poem I ever had published, and it was in the anthology. It's called Mediterranean. Ooh, buy me a dress of soft gray crepe with the sun shining on it. Let it slip gently over my body, like the Mediterranean did today. That's it. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Susan. Is Ezra here? Ezra Ben Meir? Are you here, Ezra?
I don't think he is. Is he?
No, I don't think so.
I haven't seen him.
So Judy, do you want to read his poem by proxy?
He's not on the list of people who are on the site.
Yes, well, we figured he would not be able to come because he didn't confirm. So we thought that I would read what he was originally going to say. In Ezra's voice then, he says, I first heard about Voices Israel from Hadassah Bat Chaim, Zichronah Livracha, who opened a writing course. What she wrote interested me, and she mentioned Voices to me, and I joined and received the monthly newsletter. At one stage, I suggested that each group should select one poem each meeting and then send it to me. I would then type the poems to fit the as yet blank, unused side of the newsletter. This meant that all Voices members got information about the various groups. I was the poetry page editor for many years. Eventually, it was all computerized, and the rest is history. And Ezra's poem that he wanted to read is called Rain. So far away, the eye can't tell nor see, winds gather into their bosom, uplifted waves of oceans, leave teeming life, carry their vapors aloft to the sky, joining their companions among the clouds. There in dervish dances, miscegenous clouds forward across the heavens to unknown destinations, sped by night's increasing winds, fed by forces in wild control, grow in size, glow in blacks and whites, no masters of their fate. The heavens screech in fury, clouds sweep across the seas to the sleeping land, demented clouds crash as lightning bolts break off in distress, fork down in jagged arrows, scorch earthwards, seeking prey. At last, weary of its load, the heavens unleash their vast glory, where, waiting thirstily for its elixir, precious beyond price, lies final victory for life, a cycle returned in drops of rain.
Thank you, Judy.
A very, very energetic poem, full of
Yes, yes. Okay, Ada Aharoni, I saw you here before. Ada? Ada?
What happened?
She was here.
Yes.
She certainly was. But there are only some of us shown on the side.
No, that's because I'm screen sharing.
No,
Well, I'm
she
clicking down, but I can't see her.
She was there.
Ada, you have to unmute.
But she has to take the mute off, yes.
You have to unmute. Ada, you have to unmute yourself.
I'm stopped the share at the moment so that I can see. There are 38 of us here, so I think Ada must be here. Here she is.
She is, but she's muted.
No, she's not muted.
I'm not muted.
Good. Okay. Can you read your piece, Ada, please?
Okay. But first, I wanted to thank you, Wendy, for making such a good job of really preparing all those texts. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Judy, for your wonderful work of organizing the whole thing.
Wendy did as much of the organization as me. It's really been a joint effort.
Okay. I was one of the first poets who joined Voices in 1971, when I read in the Jerusalem Post a notice by Ruben Rose inviting poets who wrote in English to a meeting in his home in Neve Sha'anan in Haifa. It was a warm and enjoyable meeting, though there were only 5 of us, Ruben Rose and his wife, Susie, Mike Scheidman, a poet from Holland, whom I forgot his name, and me. We were invited to read 2 poems each. One of the poems I read is the one I'm sending to this chapbook and which I will read in a few minutes. A Green Week. Ruben said he loved it, and I loved the 2 poems he read for their sincerity, and I decided to join. We then discussed how to call our group. Ruben suggested Voices, and we all agreed. Voices grew and developed to the wonderful organization it is today, with the help of its faithful and keen poet members and organizers. One of the peaks for me was the 13th World Congress of Poets, September 1992, of the World Academy of Arts and Culture, which I presided and organized in Haifa with the active help of Voices. The book I published covering this Congress, I have the book here, and you can see it perhaps. Beautiful book, which is still used in many universities across the world, and I'm very glad. The book I published covered this Congress was created with the editorial help of Voices members, Mike Scheidman, John Dix, and Ezra Ben Meir. Since the theme of the Congress was peace through culture, a quote from the great Israeli poet Shin Shalom, who was from Haifa, appears on the back cover of the book. When he was asked, but how can poetry help in ending wars? His answer was, a crucial cause of wars is cultural differences. These can be overcome by bridging between nations through a vehicle of culture. The best and most suitable vehicle for this gigantic enterprise, as it addresses both the mind and the heart, is poetry. Beautiful quote. And now my own poem takes us to another part of the world, to Egypt, where I grew, in Cairo. A Green Week, which was a bracha of the Jews from Egypt. A week like fresh mint, a green week spreading its fragrance to the roots of my being. Gomartek Khadra, have a green week. My father used to bless us on Saturday nights in Cairo after the Havdalah, when he came back from Shar HaShamayim, the gates of heaven, the grand synagogue in Adlai Street. Have a green week, he beamed, brandishing a fragrant mint branch over our keen heads. But don't keep it merely for yourself and your family, this scented green week. Give it back to the world, fully blossoming. Who will give me a green week now that he's gone? Now that the gates of heaven are shut? Only peace, only a real fragrant mint peace.
Very nice.
Thank you, Ada.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Yes, that was very nice.
Thanks.
Mark L. Levinson, would you like to read now?
Okay. I believe, unless I've missed somebody, that Ada has the longest Voices memory of any of us here tonight. I think I'm number 2.
I think so.
I started out in the Haifa group, and when I was in the Army around 1975 or so, I started transitioning to the Tel Aviv group, which was already a thriving group. Reuben Rose was coming from Haifa to chair the meetings, and eventually he handed the chairmanship for Tel Aviv over to me. Reuben's last issue as chief editor of the anthology was in 1988, and I edited from 1989, continuing through to 1997, 98. In Reuben's days, he held the editorial meetings at his home, and all the poems came in on paper, and all the communications were by postal mail. That's all there was. And Reuben typed the first issues himself with a manual typewriter.
Yeah.
And I took it into high tech, first using an electric typewriter,
Mhm.
then a dot matrix printer, a daisy wheel printer, and finally a laser printer. Here's a poem that I wrote when I was, I guess, in my early mid-20s. The Elements. Empty shelves of cabinets, sexless earth and cigarettes, random dogs and skin of trees, eyes of brown as dull as these. Waves and leaves in private dances, sacred to significances men don't share with wind and tide, eyes of green, unsatisfied. Rarest, commonest of things, blankest skies and costly rings, flowers or a gift of air, eyes of blue are neverywhere. Fatal stars whose gravity snaps light back before you see, all things passing fall to wreck, burn forever, eyes of black.
Very good.
Thank you, Mark. That's lovely.
Me.
I was on the editorial board at one time with Mark, and he was the most critical of editors. And I know a lot of things that we said should go in, he said shouldn't go in. And we used to have lots of discussions, again, with all these sheets of paper that we got in the post.
And they were mailed to the editor.
Yes, everything was in the mail. Okay, Mally Joy Livingstone. Are you there, Mally Joy?
Again, she was here.
I'm here.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
can hear you, yes.
Okay, fine. I found Voices sometime in the late 80s. With trepidation, I entered a room in Beit Tami in Tel Aviv to be greeted warmly by the late Roy Runs. Nervous as I was, apart from Roy and Mark Levinson, who hosted the group, I cannot remember who else was there, but I felt at home. Having quietly written poems from an early age, this was my public debut, a heady experience that has left me addicted. The first poem that I ever recited was there amongst new friends and is the following. Waste paper. Not for me, the heavy autobiography. My life is written on scraps of waste paper, just as easily thrown into the bin, but sometimes treasured. They pile up in little crumpled heaps. I like this random collection, jumbled, accumulated, thrown into a messy closet to tumble out when searching for a lost item, rediscovered with astonishment. And thus it continues haphazardly, with bits being kept or blown away in the winds of time.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mally Joy. I muted myself because there's some dogs or jackals or something making a hell of a noise outside my window. But now I've got to speak, so I have unmuted myself. Thank you, Mally Joy.
No, pleasure, thank you.
Okay, so next one is me. Okay. Soon after Aliyah, I met Reuben Rose as we had connections from our synagogue community in London. He asked me if I wrote poetry and invited me to a meeting of Voices Israel. This was in 1975. The group was large and rather intimidating. I hid in a corner, but nevertheless persevered until I felt more comfortable. One of my personal memories of Reuben is sitting at a Voices meeting, which was on that occasion at the Stella Maris Monastery, sharing a joke with another Voices poet, the monk Father Elias. Now, Reuben Rose was a religious man wearing a kippah, and he and Father Elias used to share a lot of jokes, and their roars of laughter filled the room. During the 80s, I lapsed from attending meetings as our children were studying Bagrut and preparing for army. I also worked many evenings. When I returned to Voices, the group was smaller and more friendly. I got more involved with the organizational work and in 2011 became president for the next 4 years. I'm still busy as press officer and coordinator of the Haifa group. but I really try to attend most workshops as I really enjoy the networking, and I see my poetry improving as I learn from our guest lecturers and my peer group. My dear late husband, David, joined Voices when he retired, and the group enjoyed his dry humor and somewhat bizarre poetry. And we missed him at the Haifa group. Okay, so the poem I'm reading was published in Voices Anthology 1984, and it's also part of my collection, The Soldier's Mother. Summer is over. I pack his sandwich and his apple, his gym shoes in a little crooked bag that bears testament to the incompetence of my sewing. Come in with me, Mummy. Tightly he holds my hand. First day in first grade. Summer is over. Solemnly he packs his bag. Notebooks, pencils, and instruments of math and science. He rejects the sandwich and the apple, prefers to buy falafel with his friends. Don't come in with me, Mummy. Eyes averted, he might be seen taking a ride with his mother. First day in high school. Summer is over. He gives me a list of toothpaste, soap, and wafers, a soapbox, sunglasses, spare socks, sunflower seeds. We put a surprise parcel in his bag and cook steak for dinner. Like a shorn lamb, he returns from the barber. For the first time in months, we see his ears. Don't come in with me, Mummy, but he pats my arm with a touch of tenderness. First day in the army. Okay, so the next.
Lovely, Wendy.
Now, Celia Merlin.
I'm here.
I could see you before, yeah.
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, I want to thank all of you for doing this evening, and I want to thank Voices for being here, because I think it's a very, very important part of Israeli English speakers culture. And this is my story. I made Aliyah in 1979. I had a degree in French and English literature, and I knew that my love of writing and poetry events would be much harder moving to Israel. In fact, the only English writing group that I heard about was through Tel Aviv University, but it was a small, closed group. They weren't very interested in somebody new. Later on in the late 80s, I saw a notice in the Jerusalem Post. It was like in the weekly advertisements, this little notice, very strange, poetry readings. This was before telephones or emails or anything. And I got the details of the next monthly meeting. I had no idea who or what I was going to meet, which was a bit daring to be dropped off someplace on Haifa. And I was going on my own to a group that promised poetry, led by someone named Mark Levinson. I actually didn't know it was Mark until I got there. It was just a very strange kind of advertisement. It was in the home of Rose Michaeli Zal, and immediately when I walked in, I knew I had found my peeps, a wide array of colorful poets, many who have since passed on. It was a motley group in age, country of origin, and talent. And that was the magic of Voices Israel, a group of poetry-loving people who made you feel at home in a new home, no matter where you came from, what your style, how good you were interested in poetry, you were welcome. And I am forever aware of and thankful for that. And the poem that I chose was published in Voices 1989. It's also in my my collection of this too. It's called Aliyah, the Language. I came here bringing pumpkin and squash, starched autumn air, clay, dark and oozing, fat clouds and snow, all in a basket, familiar and safe in color and nuance. I found here yellow and hamsin, turquoise and froth, irises, cacti and gardens of granite speaking to me in tongues. 10 summers have passed, and I haven't forgotten cut grass in my toes or the fireflies' glow, summer thunder and steam. But jasmine heat climbs to my terrace now, and mint sweats sweet in my tea, and the orange blossoms beckon, singing, welcome, come touch, and at last I have opened my arms. Thank you.
Celia.
Lovely, Celia.
We've all gone through this, haven't we? Okay, now Louisa Carroll. I did see her before.
Yes, I am here.
Hi, Louisa.
Hi, Louisa.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, hello. The first Voices meeting I attended was in the autumn of 1980, a few months after making Aliyah from Romania. That meeting was hosted by the monk poet Father Elias, Zichrono Lebracha, at Stella Maris, a Carmelite monastery on Mount Carmel. I was 33 years old. Until then, I had published literature in Romanian for about a decade. I had written children's literature mostly, reaching all genres of this field except novel. I left Romania during the time of one of the most terrible dictatorships of modern Europe. In 1980, people who left Romania were officially considered traitors. It was clear for me that I couldn't go on publishing anything in Romania for a long time. I couldn't publish children's books in Israel either, because I wouldn't find here the very young Romanian speaking audience I'd been accustomed to. I didn't know Hebrew at all at that time, and even now don't know it well enough to use it creatively. Apparently, I needed a change. When I discovered the Voices group, I thought that a switch to English might become an interesting new creative experience, able to widen my cultural horizon and enrich my spirit. And indeed, such it proved to be. In the beginning, I tried to keep my first English poems as short as possible in order to have a better command of the language. During the 80s, as well as much later, I received help and encouragement from a lot of wonderful friends. My elder and wiser friend, Roger White, Zichrono Lebracha, an accomplished Canadian poet who worked for the Baha'i Center in Haifa, had a deep impact on my spiritual growth. I am grateful to Ruth Tannenholt, whose empathy and enthusiasm for poetry were a great source of inspiration for me. Many friends in the group helped me refine my poetic voice during the 80s. John Dix, Mark Levinson, Tilde Fox, Grete Isaac, Zichrono Lebracha, Lou Adler, Zichrono Lebracha, and others. In the 90s, I became more and more interested in other literary genres, stories, plays, essays, and later I got more and more enthusiastic about using Esperanto as a creative language. Lately, I write mostly children's literature in Esperanto, but I continued to contribute to Voices anthologies, sometimes joined its open mics, workshops, and other literary events. When I moved to Netanya in 2019, I joined the wonderful Voices branch in Netanya Sharon, which now I love and admire. And now I read the first poem written in English in Israel, which won the first prize at Kansas Poetry Contest Haiku section in 1981. It's called A Dandelion. A dandelion, white down flying in the wind, deep, deep rooted stem. Another poem was inspired by a photo sent to me by Roger White during a trip to Canada. Northern Lights. What do they scribble on our dark sky in silent signs? What do they kindle in our dreams of frost and fright? What music of alien spheres do they score?
Thank you, Louisa. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to mention that the whole idea of doing a 50th anniversary event, it was Susan Olsberg who reminded us that this summer of 2021 would be 50 years of Voices. So I thank you, Susan, for giving us the push to get this going. Okay, now Lami Halperin.
Well,
okay.
I was in the Jerusalem group for a long time, from about 1980. We used to come regularly from the south near Gaza, Kibbutz Urim, for all the Voices meetings. I have notes from the time I visited Reuben Rose and was on the editorial board for a short time. I was on very good terms with the old timers, though I lived far away. I did live for 1 year in Jerusalem in 1979 and again in 1980, and then I hosted the group. Zoom is wonderful, as I am now 90 years old.
Wow.
And I wanted to say thank you for Louisa for mentioning Roger White. Now, Roger White was in charge of the Baha'i group here in Haifa, and he wrote a marvelous introduction to my first book called Penumbra. What I'm going to read is from my second book called Parlando Rubato. My mother rose as a valiant star in my mind. When I used to send lisping letters and half-erased postcards from summer camp, they were all sent to a drawer with the little stage curtains and stilted houses, which I had learned to draw. Or she was off campaigning, and the "How are you? I'm fine" notes were sent off as arrows, smooth as spit, vacuously false. But my father tended me with soft hands, and I thought, I am sure that he was both of them, and I was their mutual puppy. On the farm, I stood in the center of the split tree, was a dryad surveying the stream, the new violets, rivulets of cold water, hand-fed by the thinning snow. I am sorry to have given up my kingdom, and now that my father has faded, my mother has risen in my mind as a valiant star, more to follow, more to praise, as I sit lisping among the letters and the old love.
Thank you, Lami.
I want to apologize to everybody. I had a coughing attack in the middle of that, and I can't mute myself for some reason. When I see now I can, but I couldn't find where to mute myself, so I just ran out the door to cough outside it so that nobody would hear. And in the process, of course, I was not available to scroll up the share screen. So I'm sorry, Lami.
We thought you'd gone to get some coffee.
I'm not going to do some coughing.
Coughing. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Lami.
We're able
Now,
to hear Lami clearly in any event.
Ruth Fogelman, last but not least.
I am here.
Yes, I saw you before.
Ah,
Okay, my dear friend Gretty Isaac introduced me to voices. The first meetings I attended were in the home of Anne-Marie Königsberger in Beta Kerem. I also remember Mike Schneiderman, having come to Jerusalem from his kibbutz. He sat in the middle of the sofa, the only person wearing shorts, and he made comments. Mel Millman, too, our treasurer, was a very positive contributor to the meetings. At that point, Helen Bar-Lev and John Michael Simon were still living in the Jerusalem area, and both greatly enhanced the meetings. In the summer of 2009, we moved to Beta Sofer in Beta Am. Among our very active members were Gretty, Etienne Goldwater, and the three Evas, Eva Aviona, Evi Pinchas Emmanuel, and Eva Shaltiel. It's possible that I had already been elected to serve as the coordinator of the Jerusalem group by this time, a position I agreed to as a way of helping Gretty, who was not well enough to continue helping to organize the monthly meetings. The most challenging part of every meeting was selecting poems as our Jerusalem choice, for the most part on such a high level. From there, our group was blessed to find a home for our meetings in the center of town, in the beautiful apartment of Toby Schuster, where we held our monthly meetings until the Corona era, when meetings were moved to Zoom. I remember being a presenter in a couple of workshops along with other Voices members. One of them was held in the lovely home of Wendy Bloomfield at the bottom of a steep hill. That was your previous home, Wendy. One of the workshops I gave was on Denise Levertov and Mary Oliver. The following poem was written during the heavy wave of terror in 2002 and first appeared in the 2002 Voices anthology. Many years later, it appeared in my first book of poetry, which took its title from the last line, Cradled in God's Arms. Jerusalem, 2002. Whether I walk along a busy street, stand at a junction, or ride a city bus, I need to know that like a baby in its mother's arms, wherever she travels, the babe is in the same place, in her arms. And I too, O Lord, whether in this world or in my way beyond it, or having left this world, I am cradled in your arms.
very good.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you. And so you see by all these veteran poets and members of Voices that they've all been involved in the organization and enriched the organization over the years. And now Judy is going to continue with the continued life of Voices of our newer poets, and we're doing open mic, and she'll be talking about some of our projects and programs. Okay, Judy? Unmute yourself.
There. I am now unmuted. Thank you, Wendy. That was all lovely. In the Voices Lives On afterward, before we get to the open mic, Voices today has around 150 members on 4 continents. We'll probably continue to hold international events such as the competition award events via Zoom in order to enable our overseas members to attend. Some of our smaller local groups might also decide to stay with virtual Zoomed meetings to gain the benefit of a larger number of members than could come to in-person meetings. We are blessed with a wonderful team to guide Voices in our current technological era. Susan Olsberg has become our Zoom coordinator, scheduling all our myriad activities and monthly meetings. Yohanan Zakantov, in addition to being our membership coordinator, has taken on the production of online evaluation forms for our workshops, and together with Mark L. Levinson, provides technical help during our Zoom meetings. Mark is also our long-term Reuben Rose administrator. Hanita Milman, our treasured treasurer, negotiates unfazed the new unknown territory of PayPal membership renewals and other payments. Linda Suchi, our intrepid secretary, recently produced a new look for our digital newsletter. Dina Yuda edits the anthology, which again in the last couple of years has undergone a sea change and is now mainly edited and produced by Submittable, which she says saves her a lot of time. Okay. Avril Melem has taken over the production of the anthology as of this year, and I just sent that the anthology to the printer, and she's done a wonderful job. Okay. Susan Bell administers the Bar Sagi Prize, and Wendy, our publicity officer, keeps Voices Israel in the news with a stream of articles in print and online publications. A big thank you to all of them, and I know with a team like that, we could only go forward from strength to strength. Thank you, everybody. That concludes the official section of our meeting, and now we come to the open mic section, in which 14 of us have registered to read a poem each. I am not going to screen share here because I don't have the text of the poem, so people will please have to read clearly and loudly, but I will call each of you in order. We're going to go by alphabetical order of first names, except for a couple of people who wanted to be first because they would have to leave early. I hope they are still with us. The first is Pesach Rotem. Pesach, are you still with us?
I am with you.
Great.
I'm with you, Judy.
And Pesach is going to read, Carrie, get out your cane.
Okay, first I would like to thank Judy and Wendy and everybody involved in this wonderful evening. And here we go. Carrie, get out your cane. When I was 15 years old, Joni Mitchell came out with a new album called Blue that had a song called Carrie that went, "Oh, you're a mean old daddy, but I like you." And when I heard that song, I resolved right then and there that someday I would have a girlfriend. I'm talking now about a real girlfriend, not an imaginary girlfriend. That someday I would have a real girlfriend, and someday I would be a mean old daddy. I had my first real girlfriend the summer after my junior year of high school. We were counselors in a camp. She said, "I think you're cute." And I said, "Thank you very much. My grandmother also thinks I'm cute." But she never said, "Oh, you're a mean old daddy, but I like you." Time went on. I went to university and I graduated and I went out into the world. I thought about becoming a professional motorcycle racer, but then I decided, for various reasons, to become a marketing content writer instead. Later, as the 20th century transitioned into the 21st, I myself transitioned from regular marketing content writer into online marketing content writer. And I must say, at risk of immodesty, that I am a damn good one. But alas, online marketing content does not a mean old daddy make.
Very nice.
I am now 65 years old. I will never read the Odyssey in the original Greek. I will never pole vault 15 feet. I will never argue a case before the United States Supreme Court. I will never see Machu Picchu. I will never be a mean old daddy.
Thank you, Pesach. Thank you.
You.
Lovely as usual.
Thank
Our
you.
next reader is Helen Sarid with The Plant. Go ahead, Helen, unmute yourself.
I think I have. Do you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Good. Okay. So this is called The Plant. This plant has not bloomed in years. Its sturdy leaves, green with white highlights, surround an inner circling from which a proud pink flower should emerge. I've wanted to replace it, but he said, "Be patient. Nature has its ways, its own time. Perhaps the long gestation will provide a stronger bloom." I believe him, as I always have, in the long shared years experience, that belief blossoms from trust, and trust is what it takes to create the belief that spawns patience. Carrying my breakfast tray this morning out on the terrace, I gasped and held my breath through a moment of silence before a second look confirmed two beautiful pink flowers just beginning to show amidst their tall green stalks. And as they emerge, taller each day, from within their rounded grotto, reaching for the open space to spread their spidery petals and show their inner glory, like a song erupting from a lover's heart, I see his promise still fulfilled, though time has taken the beloved to another sphere.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next is Avril Melem with a meditation, cave journey experience. Avril.
I have to unmute. And so I'll just say this cave journey experience occurred 4 days after my very dear friend Gretty Ishak passed away. And I do these cave journeys when only when I'm in a hot bath. So this was one experience. Soaking in a hot bath, thinking of Gretty, I close my eyes, enter my special cave, and wait. I see a descending rope ladder, climb down, reach a hard surface. I am in a dark tunnel. There's a door in the distance. Instantly, I'm in front of the door, open it, enter a vast banquet hall illuminated with sparkling crystal chandeliers. People are sitting at long tables that are draped with white tablecloths, without any plates, cutlery, glasses, food, or drinks. So strange. I sense there is a wonderful atmosphere of great joy. Music is coming from a grand piano, although the pianist isn't touching the keys. My parents and grandparents appear, seem unaware of my presence. I wonder if Gretty is here too, but I cannot see her. Suddenly, a brilliant white light fills the hall, obscuring everything. A powerful gust of wind lifts me up, wishes me away. Now I'm sitting on a huge rock with nothing in sight. No earth, no sky, total emptiness. I feel a presence behind me, giving me a hug. Could it be Gretty? Her gold watch appears in my hand. It was too big for her, and I had always wondered how it didn't annoy her being so loose. I know now that it is Gretty. She's telling me that she can still hug me, but I can no longer hug her. A human body cannot hug a spirit. I can hear her speaking, but there's no sound. I just know what she is saying. She tells me that she is in a beautiful place and not to worry or be sad. I ask her why doesn't she hug me from in front? I want to see her. You cannot see me, but just know that I'm all around you. I am the one now comforting you with hugs, just as you had always done for me. I will be with you when you write from a place deep within yourself. Now it's time for me to leave. I have to continue on my journey, but tell others about this. How will I get back? I ask her. You just will, I hear, and she's gone. Again, a gust of wind lifts me up, pushes me backwards. I've returned to my cave. Walking out through the narrow cave entrance, I open my eyes into the real world, back in my hot bath. Overcome by the awe of the experience and the deep sadness of separation, I sob from the depth of my being.
Whoa. Wow. Thank you, Avril. Very, very intriguing and very moving. And now, David Silverman, The Pain That Cuts Deep.
Thank you. I'm reading this poem, The Pain That Cuts Deep, about my son Matthew, who made Aliyah in 2011. And right around the time I got the invitation for this event, he actually spent his last day in the IDF after 9 years. He smartly chose his wife and 2-year-old daughter over his unit. And now he's working for a high-tech unicorn in Tel Aviv, which may not be less stressful than being a combat soldier in the IDF, but his parents are a lot more relaxed. So it begins with an epigraph from the famous poem Agasha Kesef by Natan Alterman. Goes like this. A youth and lass slowly march toward the nation, dressed in battle gear, full of endless fatigue. Yet the dew of youth is still seen on their head. Then a nation in tears and amazement will ask, "Who are you?" And they will answer quietly, "We are the silver platter on which the Jewish nation was given." When my son was 13, with a sweet jump shot, but 4 inches too short to make the team, he wailed on the car ride home, his grief real and deep. And though I understood why he had been cut in more ways than one, I had to pull over, unable to see the road through my own sodden eyes. But I knew what he didn't. He'd never be cut from a team again. When my son was 16, he told me and my wife that he needed to go to Poland to see the camps, said he would pay the $2,000 himself. We asked him why, and he answered with his own question, "How can I pass up the privilege of being the witness?" And as if we needed more convincing, that generation is almost gone. They are relying on the witnesses to tell the story. When my son was 18, he told me and my wife he was joining the Israeli army. We asked him why, and he answered again with a question, "How can I pass up the privilege to serve in the first Jewish army since Bar Kokhba?" Afraid, knowing the now well-built point guard with a killer jump shot would not be sitting at a desk, I said in a voice too harsh, "This isn't a novel. You're not Ari Ben Canaan." Instead of responding in kind and with a literary reference better than mine, he disarmed me with a smile. The Jewish nation, he said, wasn't given on a silver platter. When he was 24, my son, the captain, came home on furlough. He does not discuss his life as a soldier, and this is probably best. And he has never spoken about the camps, though my wife and I have asked. But that's okay. When he is called, the witness will take the stand. Throughout the too short visit, just to look at him leads me to tears, but I make no effort to conceal my sodden eyes. Matt learned long ago to appreciate the pain that cuts deep. And though he is now forever beyond the dew of youth, I do not have to ask him who he is. He is the silver platter on which my life was given.
Very good.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Very moving too. Donna, it's your turn next with takeaway.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can
Could I
everybody
ask
hear
everybody
me?
else to please
Yes,
mute
yes.
themselves?
Okay, very good. Takeaway. Taken away were our free-flowing comings and goings, our museum and country hopping days, our restaurant life, whittled down to takeaway coffee and croissant. Corralled in our own backyards, isolation our warden, restlessness our guardian, 1 kilometer square our playpen. I discovered hitherto hidden treats my globetrotting had left undiscovered or shunned or ignored. Forced into this microcosm, its macrocosm emerged to me, opening itself to my newfound openness to its festival of delights. Wandering through my neighborhood, I discovered, like Dorothy with her ruby slippers, what was here all along. Down narrow pathways, off small side streets, betwixt and between and behind buildings, a myriad of small and mid-sized parks and gardens, waiting for my eyes and ears and drawing hand. Each park with its own configuration of flora, landscaping, walkways, fountains or falls, benches, hills and mounds, jungle gyms, was a source of serenity, imbuing me with pleasure and peace, inspiration and entertainment. Now I speculated on their mysterious lives and watched the Congress communing and treasure hunts of pigeons and crows, mynas and parrots, sparrows and hoopoes. I watched their comedies and melodramas, their camouflaging, their scurried flights from perch to perch, their pickings and peckings and feastings, watched canine canoodling and felicitous feline gymnastics, and the antics of toddlers. I was transfixed by the floral and leafy artworks, the color symphonies and marriages of bougainvillea, oleanders and lantana, of morning glories and cyclamen, of hyacinth, hibiscus, anemones and pansies, and the shape of their petals. I observed, was mesmerized by, and tried to capture the essence and spirit of flame trees and picky-wickies and jacaranda and palms, the branch dances of figs, mighty oaks and sycamores, with their complex, ever-varied choreographies, their self-expression veining and lacing the sky with their filigree. I noticed and tried to translate to paper the thickness and textures of their scaly or striated or smooth or deeply creviced or thorny barks, the feel and impressionistic forms of their leaves. This is my takeaway from Corona for my travels back through normal times. It's luggage that I love to lug with me everywhere I go.
Thank you, Donna. The next person is Leah Katzenel. Are you here, Leah?
Hello. Yes, this is
good.
Celia from Beersheba calling. My poem is called Poetic Communication. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Good, okay. Poetic Communication. It's not written for the meter, nor created for the rhyme. It's destined to say something that needs saying at the time. The content can be anything, the message what you will, but the format should entice you and offer you a thrill. Ideas nicely set forth, words succinctly wise and witty, compact communication and aesthetic verbal ditty. A poem's a special vehicle that challenges the mind, and ear and eye it ought to please with senses aligned.
Okay.
Thank you. Great. Okay, now we have Chaim Abramson with Let It Be. Chaim, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. And since I mentioned some of the memories, I was from the Jerusalem group some years, and I always had encouragement from Greti Isaac, Zichronah Livracha, in particular. I always look up to her as a very nice, special person. At some point, I sent her a book of mine in the internet, and she wrote back to me. She praised the book, and the letter that she wrote praising the book to her, then is something that I keep. One of the very few things that I keep in my room to remember her in particular. So also we have Rina Navon, Hannah Moshe, they are obviously Avril and Ruth Fogelman. So all this group of people, they have encouraged me as a person, and it was nice to see them from time to time. I was with the Israel Center for 23 years, giving lessons there, and then I retired, so I couldn't go so much there. But in any case, we came back with the Zoom, which has been a blessing to me. So the poem I want to read, I put in the chat in case you want to follow through. It's there, and it's a play on words, as it were. The title is "Let It Be," with the 2 E's. Let it be. To be or not to be is not a question. Said the passing by be. I would rather work than break a leg. Oh, sweet thing, stay with me. Sorry, but they are waiting for me to thrive in the beehive. How about a later day to begin our romance with a clean slate? Thanks, but not. I love my queen and I need take care of little bees. Let us at least share some quick news on the run. Oh, that I can do. To tell you that my back hurts with all that pollen that I carry. It is hard going from flower to flower. The supervisor is quite strict. I must fill up my daily quota there. Don't forget the noise, zooming all day long, unbearable. Only at night there is a slow down to sleep and deep dream. In truth, I can barely rest for lack of room, and already we wake up at sunshine. What of vacations? Ah, that is a good thing. We have benefits. In the winter, we stay inside, keeping the queen warm. I want to mention from the two sites below that bees do dream, according to, they have made the studies, they do dream, and they also, they hibernate, and they are all around the queen to keep her warm as a wall, as it were. So very interesting, and so let it be. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaim. Thank you. Very, very cute, I have to say. I very much enjoyed that. And next on the list I see is me. I've chosen a short poem. I usually write metrical verse, and this is no exception. The interesting thing about this is that it's a poem I wrote for the Deronda Review's numbers issue that came out earlier this year. I sent it in and they duly rejected it. And then a little later, I was sending a few poems into The Road Not Traveled, which is a nice, one of my favorite formal poetry magazines. And I didn't have enough for the number that they wanted. They wanted 3 to 5, and there were really only 2 that I thought they would be interested in. So I threw this in just to make up the number to the minimum. And to my astonishment, this was the only one they were interested in of the lot, which just goes to show you that you can never tell what people will like. Sorry. It's called The X Factor. a mathematical lesson. When my ex left me, I asked why. He said my shape had grown unreal. I needed to divide by half to multiply my sex appeal. I'd thought his love was infinite, where it was merely rational. It decimated me to know our feelings weren't reciprocal. For me, pure love was cardinal. For him, just my topology. To make our marriage workable, we lacked the needed symmetry. The sorry end of this affair should caution women to be wary. Before you integrate, take care his love is not imaginary.
That's really nice. That's really nice.
Okay, so now we have Michelle Bastin, My Personal History of Soup. You with us still, Michelle?
Yes, I'm here. Okay. A personal history of soup. I went back to my mother's kitchen where no meal was complete without soup. Steaming, clear, golden chicken broth, the ultimate comfort food, countless generations long remedy for anything fair. Spicy, deep orange tomato soup, bright clown-like streak above lips, fluffy white rice melting on tongue, full-flavored, fragrant and thick. Deep burgundy beetroot soup, debauched from the homeland in the east, served sometimes cold with buttermilk, refreshing in the hot summer heat, changing its mood when winter comes to a sweet sour warmth from within. Nutritious chunky vegetable soup with whatever was in season, but always carrots, onions and celery in every full steaming wholesome pot, kaleidoscope of texture and color for lunch or dinner or supper. Hearty barley, green and red lentil soup for the coldest and darkest of days. A substantial meal so thick, rich and so thick, gave ample sustenance in secret ways. I came back from my mother's kitchen. Now, no meal is complete without soup.
Thank you. Okay, now we have Miriam Webber, and before Miriam starts to read, she asked me to screen share a picture while she is reading. So I will screen share now, and then Miriam, are you with us? Miriam Webber?
Ken, I just unmuted.
Ah, good, great. Here you are. There is your picture. Can you see it?
Yes, fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
And her poem is called Eve's Embroidered Version of the Naked Truth. And I believe it arose from that Haifa workshop we had recently.
Right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just want to make sure. Yes?
Yes.
Indeed, this poem was inspired by a recent workshop presentation of the Bible story of Adam and Eve, and my own handwork, designed by my husband and embroidered by me many years ago. Eve's embroidered version of the naked truth, a cinquain. The artist who designed this pose should first have checked it out with me. A compromise could have been found. To sit bare-bottomed on the ground, I never would agree. What did the artist try to say by showing Adam tired and bored? I've offered him this strange round fruit to share with me, the handsome brute. He wants it peeled and cored. That serpent of a salesman said, "It's tasty." I could not resist. I took one. How could I foresee what consequences there would be, what pleasures might be missed? The ribbing tale of how we met, how he was left without a scar, but with the point of view of men. He thinks he owns me. Think again. Here, I'm the boss, so far. He knows me well. We've had some fun. God's told us off about our sin. We'll cover up our nether parts in deference to pictorial arts. Begetting can begin.
Lovely, Miriam, lovely. Okay, and so we move on to Reuven Goldfarb with Personae poem.
Yes, I'm here. I assume you can hear me okay?
Yes, I can anyway.
Yes.
Excellent. I know everybody can't say yes because they're muted.
Oh, there you are.
And then you got me? Okay. So the genesis of this poem, my wife and I went for a stroll one afternoon to a park in our home city at Sfat called Emek HaTelech, the Blue Valley Park. And there we encountered two members of our poetry writing group, Esther Rubinstein and Devorah Natkin. And on the spot, I wrote a poem for each of us and then added some things later. So I'll read the poems. This one is ascribed to Esther Rubinstein. A dazzling woman. My garments are begemmed. They sparkle plenty. Reflecting light, they distract you. I'm hidden in their midst. Would you explore further or stay on the periphery? If so, stay your gaze. I am not for you. The next poem, this is for Devorah. It's called Minimalistic. I am a woman of few words, deep feelings, but few words. Do you understand what I say? Then I don't have to explain. My few words will suffice. And I have a second poem for Devorah. It's called An Imaginary Cake. I've got an imaginary cake in my mind, the cake I would have baked had I gathered all my ingredients first. Then I would have remembered the ginger, cinnamon, and cloves, along with the shredded carrots and flour. My friends say it tastes fine. They're right, of course. But I cannot help thinking of the cake that might have been. This short one is for my wife, Yehudit. It's called Waiting. I am waiting for the kugel to coagulate. And the final one is one for myself. I wrote it during the arts festival we had in the Galilee a few years ago. It's called Amidah. All you can hear is the trilling of the cicadas. That's me.
Thank you, Reuben. Thank you.
Bakasha.
Okay, now Ricky Friesen with Peace.
With peace. And I have to excuse myself after this. It's been amazing, and I love Zoom, and I love all of you. And I have to go after.
Well, we only have two people left to read after.
Oh, well, then I can stay.
I knew I could convince you.
It wasn't difficult. Peace. My friend sent me a photo from somewhere in Sweden. She is sitting beside a cobalt blue lake, wrapped in a white robe, knees to her chest, head turned to the sun. In the background, a steep ochre cliff into which someone has hammered a row of towel pegs, perfectly rounded and painted cobalt blue to match the lake. And I think how wonderful it must be to live where a row of towel pegs in the middle of nowhere still matters.
Thank you, Vicky. Interesting. Okay, Stanley, all the way from New York. Shaliach Mitzvah. Are you still with us, Stanley?
Hi.
Great.
The poem I'm going to read is Shaliach Mitzvah. I wrote it when I was in Israel, invited as one of the 10 editors to participate in the Jerusalem International Book Fair. It's published in this book, O Jerusalem, which was published on the occasion of the 3000th anniversary of Jerusalem at City Hall, invited by Giuliani. Here's the poem. And I think considering that we're suffering from a old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times, it is perhaps up to date. In Jerusalem, he gave me $1 to give to a needy man somewhere in New York. A blessed message that I'm told would protect me. The messenger of a good deed comes to no harm. So I carried it like a live coal in my pocket, wondering how I could get through airline security. I fingered it like a worry bead, like a Hindu crystal, all the long journey from Tel Aviv to New York. It glowed hot and fiery, all the car trip back to my home in Merrick, Long Island. And all night long it threatened to burst into flames. The next morning I drove into Manhattan, sought out a truly worthy-looking homeless man, took out the dollar, stuck it in his hand, glad to be rid of it, like the flask in the Stevenson tale of the bottle imp. As I turned away, I heard a crack, a sound of thunder. I turned back, and there was fire. Flames burst out of the hand of the homeless man. All the homeless men were burning like the beggars and cripples and poor in a legend of Vlad Tepes. All New York was ablaze. The world, too, was ending in fire, while I was frozen, turned to a pillar of ice. Thank you.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Food for thought. Okay, and we round off this evening with our past president, Susan Olsberg, who will read us a villanelle for voices.
Thank you, Judy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. At this point, I'd just really like to say so much on behalf of everyone here, a heartfelt thank you to you and to Wendy for the way in which you conceived this evening and brought us a beautiful special event and paid tribute to voices past and present. It's been a great job, a great job. My poem came inspired from a voices workshop held at your home, Susan Rosenberg, in 2019. Judy, you were a presenter, Iris Dan was, and I was, and my role was to explain the villanelle. And so this is called a villanelle for voices. Writing poetry is never a bore. Sometimes poems gallop, sometimes just trot, much more fun shared with voices evermore. Recalled emotion is the poem's core. At times we need a narrative or plot. Writing poetry is never a bore. Free verse is now within poetic law. In the past, this format was often not. Much more fun shared with voices evermore. At writing workshops, we cannot ignore what a polyglot membership we have got. Writing poetry is never a bore. If feeling beached on the creative shore, explore our website. We have got a lot. Much more fun shared with voices evermore. Voices Israel swells your poetry store. Our meetings are great. Give them your best shot. Writing poetry is never a bore. Much more fun shared with voices evermore.
Thank you. Thank you for writing it, and thank you for reading it. And thank you, everybody, for a wonderful evening. And I would just like to say thank you especially to the daughter of Mike Scheidman, Vered, who is here, has been here with us the whole evening, and I didn't get the moment to say hello to her and to greet her. So we were very, very pleased to have you, Vered, and thank you for joining us.
I think we should do
very
this
much
in the next 50 years.
Thank you.
Do this again in
And
another 50
again, my
years,
apologies for being a forgetful old man.
Thank you all for allowing us to join you.
So I now declare this meeting closed, and thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.